Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us today in this session as part of the 27th COP Climate Change Conference of Paris. So today the topic will be nature-based solutions. As you have seen, one of the major topics of this COP27. So my name is Veronica Ruiz. I'm the Climate and Disaster Resilience Program Manager for the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And today you will hear from these great speakers a bit more on nature-based solutions. So today's event, we will focus on nature-based solutions from the angle of what are the impacts, what are the benefits of nature-based solutions, and what is the engagement mechanism on NBS, and the importance of applying the impact assessment framework. This handbook, the European Handbook on Impact Evaluation Assessment, aims to provide practitioners with a comprehensive nature-based solutions impact assessment framework and a robust set of indicators and methodologies to assess impact of NBS across 12 societal challenges. But I don't want to go more into detail because we are very lucky to have our first speaker with us, Mrs. Laura Welding, which will talk a bit more in detail to you, and she will be providing an introduction to the handbook. So with no further, I would like to introduce you Laura Welding, who leads the research team on nature-based solutions at BBT, Technical Research Center of Finland. And she is the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 Nature-based Solutions Project, Urban Nature Labs, UNALAB project, but also she co-leads the development of the NBS Impact Assessment Handbook for Practitioners that she will give you much more detail, and also about the summary for policymakers that was launched also last year in September 2021. So Lara, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. And can I have the next slide, please? Great, we can go into the first one. So why do we measure the impact of NBS? I think this is really a fundamental question, and it's not only to understand the performance, so the effectiveness, but because we know that NBS, nature-based solutions, have so many different co-benefits. In our handbook, we've categorized these benefits across 12 different areas. So everything from health and well-being to participatory governance to these more environmental aspects like green space management and water management. But there's so many different benefits that we can gain from understanding the impacts of NBS, things like building knowledge and social capacity amongst our stakeholders and citizens, improving the participatory nature of processes within municipalities, and helping to achieve some of the targets in strategies and other policy instruments. Can I have a next slide? So when we talk about an integrated assessment framework, this is, and the handbook, it's actually kind of a series of 3 different handbooks. Our core publication was developed in collaboration with 17 different projects and experts from EU programs. More than 200 experts from across the European Union were involved in contributing to this sort of compendium of knowledge. And the handbook provides a step-by-step guide through developing, implementing, and then monitoring and evaluating the impact of a nature-based solution. It's meant to be read hand in hand with this appendix of methods, which is a rather weighty document that includes all of the different methods of assessment that we were able to collect as a group, and provides sort of a brief introduction to each method, walks you through it. Finally, all of these, both of these documents are summarized in a summary for policymakers, which kind of gives the high-level messages. We'll go a little bit more in depth in the next slide. Right, so our handbook for NBS impact evaluation walks us through why, we start with why do we even want to, why do we monitor the impact of NBS? And then, okay, so I want to monitor the impact. Well, how do I do it? How do I design and implement a monitoring strategy in collaboration with local stakeholders? What kinds of different indicators are there to help us understand impact? And then how do I select the right ones? There's a series of case studies presented that give you examples of how different indicators have been packaged to try to understand the holistic benefits or co-benefits of a particular nature-based solution or NBS action. And there's a separate chapter on specific nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction. Finally, it's all summarized in a final chapter on data. So what are all the different sources of data? Do I have to go out and collect all this information on my own from zero? Or what information might be available already to me, freely available, that I can use? And as I said previously, the appendix of methods kind of goes hand in hand with the handbook, and you can use it side by side. Next slide, please. As far as the indicators of performance and impact, as I mentioned, we have 12 different categories of impact. We've grouped the different indicators of benefits into these 12 categories, and then we went one step further and we tried to map these against the Sustainable Development Goals. So the People, Prosperity, Planet triad of Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, these are not mutually exclusive categories, but it tries to give you a better idea of where they may fit within existing municipal, regional, or national plans. Within the indicators in the handbook, we've separated these further into those that are really highly recommended. So if you have limited resources or really just need a starting point, these recommended indicators can provide a basis for a very good, very comprehensive monitoring strategy. Then there's a whole series of additional indicators. The thing about indicators is that they're pretty context specific. I mean, every action is unique. And so we want to be able to pick and choose the ones that are best for us. So there is no magic recipe. You know, the experts within this task force that developed the handbook did our very best to try to decide what kinds of indicators might be universally applicable. And we recommended these. But every action is different. And so I would very strongly encourage you to have a look at the full menu. You know, there's more than 400 different indicators to choose from, and the wide variety of different assessment methods and the way the data are collected. So there's qualitative and quantitative data, there's modeled data, there's information that's based on sensors or Earth observation. You can find the right mix for you. Next slide. This is just a brief example of the sort of information that you may find or that you can find in the appendix of methods. The methods are pretty brief. Most of these have been synthesized from multiple different sources, and you can see at the very bottom, hopefully you can read at the very bottom. In this particular example, there are a few different sources listed where you can go for more specific information. But what we've really tried to do is just compile the best knowledge that we have or that we had at the time of publication and provide that really summary synthesis of what is this method, what does it measure, how does it do it, what are the units of measure, what kind of expertise is required, and at what scale does it measure. And then what I think is pretty cool is that each of these methods is then linked to others. It'll say, well, if you measure this, it also tells you about this other indicator or provide the same information that you need to measure this other thing. So it's very intuitive, I think, and although there's a lot of methods combined together in the appendix of methods, it should not be overwhelming or in any way deter you from using it. It's very simple. Next slide. And finally, the summary for policymakers is where we've really just tried to highlight some of the main messages. So we have a few key messages that were highlighted here for the high-level messaging. Just what are the main things that should be understood about NBS and monitoring the impacts of nature-based solutions. There's some very nice examples provided, nice illustrations and really good graphics showing, walking through step by step, how was this done in some different places. So there's a really excellent case study on the development of theory of change and a couple on monitoring different aspects of benefits, the different benefits that have been attained in two specific case studies that were quite different. So and with that, I think I'll close and we can hear more about the actual case studies.
Thank you so much, Laura. And you asked one question, and I find very pertinent, linked to this morning session also, nature-based solutions. You say, like, why monitor? This morning, the question was, why MBS? So monitoring is one of the ways where we can monitor what is, and to be able to emphasize what is the potential and the impact of nature-based solutions, to then say, like, why MBS? Because of these reasons. So I think it was a really good question that you pointed. And thank you so much for giving us this, setting the stage on today's event. And now, please, you will have access to Slido, and we will launch it now with the first question of today. And the question is, which of the following impact areas do you believe are the most likely to change through MBS implementation? So you have a little bit of time, not much. We will give you 30 seconds. So please try to reply. And then we will see what are the results of this first question. Okay. Oh, okay, interesting results, which is quite linked to today's speaker's intervention, and we will certainly hear a bit more about some of them. We see urban heat is one of, especially when it comes to urban landscape, one of the most, let's say, key topics to be discussed. We have flood mitigation and water quality management as well. This is kind of in urban context as well. And then we go with green jobs and inclusive participatory processes. So with these results, and even though in the script it shows at the third topic, most interesting one on new economics opportunities and green jobs, I would like now to hand over to our second speaker today. We have the chance to have with us Dr. Mary Lee Rhodes. She is Associate Professor of Public Management at the Trinity College, where it's very sunny today in Ireland. So her research is focused on complex public service system and the dynamics of innovation, value, and impact. And she teaches as well system change, social innovation, and social entrepreneurship in the Trinity Business School. So she's the co-director of the Trinity Center for Social Innovation and has long expertise in research, consulting, and management in the public and not-profit sectors, along with extensive private sector experience in banking and ICT management. So over to you, Mary Lee, to give us much more details in terms of what is become known, MBS and new economics opportunities and green jobs.
Sorry, now I'm right. Thank you so much, Veronica. Appreciate that intro, and happy to be here at COP27. I'm going to be talking about what seems to be, from the feedback, one of the things people think are least impacted by nature-based solutions, but hopefully at the end of this, you'll have a bit more of a sense of exactly what we're talking about. If we could go to the next slide, please. What we're talking about here is results from a project called Connecting Nature, where we had 11 cities implementing or starting to implement nature-based solutions in a process of co-production, working with city management, private sector, communities, and academics. So the project was funded with 11.5 million from the European Commission, with about a million per city. But what you see there is at the front-runner cities, where there was an actual implementation of a nature-based solution, were significantly more expensive than the ones who were following on preparing for nature-based solutions. So the first thing to say is that they're giving you a sense of the kind of monies involved in putting together a nature-based solution. I go to the next slide, please. These are the cities: Poznan in Poland, Genk in Belgium, and Glasgow in the UK. And the nature-based solutions that were implemented there, these are the front-runner cities. There were nature-oriented playgrounds, replacing asphalt with grass or gardens in schools. There was a large park area built along a river and some water management, and then businesses developed there. And then lastly, in Glasgow, there was open space that was not being used conversion and community development as part of the use of open space in a more nature-friendly way. So those are the kinds of projects that were the main ones around which we gathered information. The fast follower cities, we would have gathered information about their expected plans and then their expected impacts. So this is empirical data about what exactly sorts of economic impacts can you expect from nature-based solutions. And what we found is that I'm saying, as we expected, that new jobs would be created as you had to build or create these nature-based solutions. But more evidence was that there were new businesses. So people started up new ways of doing things in these nature-based solutions. So you might find that you had a new way of managing for nurseries for plants, community food groups. There were new ways of planning businesses and consultations. So thinking about how to embed nature into the activities of the city was something that did create new business opportunities, not just new job opportunities. The third one you see there is net impact on public sector expenditure. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But essentially, this is a clear one, is you have to invest in these things, which will create demand for resources before you can realize the benefits. And just the other two potential impacts in our study, one is that an increase or decrease in tourism revenues in terms of bringing people into the space, or indeed, if you're converting into an area where you have to move people out, it will decrease the tourism. Neither one of those were really collected information about that. That would have been indicators or impacts that would have been seen as something down the road. And then the second one is private sector investment in public goods and services. So attracting the private sector in to invest in nature-based solutions or nature-based approaches to development. And this is something that we had one example of and ones that we felt would be coming down the tracks. To come back, well, this is the data on the cities and the projects that they had and the specific impacts that they highlighted in terms of their nature-based solutions. And what you see there is that the one on new businesses and as the net impact on public expenditure were the two highest, with additional jobs being the third one, and some highlights there on tourism and private finance. So we go to the next slide. So this is the question of public finance and the impact of these. This is a kind of a classic screen about the levels of investment required to put in any sort of large public infrastructure idea, but this is also in the smaller nature-based solutions. You see the planning starts with some expense, then there's a significant amount of capital investment followed by ongoing operational costs. And it is this kind of profile of investment where you have to think about how you're going to bring in the funds for this that is a critical part of nature-based solutions. So the commitment and investment and leadership from the public sector is a key enabler to ensure that these things happen, but also engaging with community investors and entrepreneurs to enable the finance to be found, and then for the operational costs to be addressed. And then thirdly, this technical expertise in impact selection and measurement. To the extent that these projects rely on private investment or indeed community engagement, being able to deliver clear messages about what sort of impacts you're having, more on the social and environmental side, is vital to attract the kind of finance and resources that you're looking for. Next slide. Some of the key challenges that we found in our projects was integrating the nature-based solution aims with the strategic objectives of the city, having some alignment there, explaining how the nature-based solutions fit in with strategies. developing a theory of change, and thank you to Laura for mentioning that this is a key part of understanding what impacts you might have with your nature-based solutions. Engaging with the stakeholders, this is a critical piece to support the rolling out of any sort of impact from nature-based solutions, but particularly getting engagement from those who might be in the community or entrepreneurial activity to support the nature-based solution. And then lastly, measuring impact, although the guidebook is fantastic, it is something where skills and capacity for doing that can be quite a challenge. So the key messages on the economic and jobs side is that while nature-based solutions are public sector led, they will activate economic activities across a number of stakeholders, that these economic impacts arise largely from innovation and entrepreneurship, not so much of a sort of a understanding of higher revenues into the city or into businesses, but new businesses and new innovations. And then thirdly, that impact measurement, while difficult, it is not impossible, and that we would encourage people to sort of take that up from the beginning in order to support the ongoing inputs of economic and other resources. And I'll leave it there and pass it on to my colleagues for their side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marilee, for very detailed presentation. And I will just to make the link in between your presentation to the next one. But before I kind of forget that, please, you can go to Slido and then leave your questions over there. And then we will go back at the end of the session with this, with some moderated questions. But going back to this link, you did mention nature-based solutions can activate economic activities and innovation. And obviously, this is the funding coming behind, right? And one of the major topics that we are seeing nowadays is also like about carbon sequestration. How are we sequestering carbon? What are the opportunities? What are the mechanisms that we can work on this, right? Especially under the framework of the COP27, carbon being one of the major topics that are being discussed as well. This is a smooth link into our next speaker, which is Raul Sanchez. He will talk us about assessing the impact of nature-based solutions for urban heat mitigation and carbon sequestration. And he will showcase the result and experiences for his project he's working on, Urban Green Up. So Raul, he is a forestry engineer and researcher in agroforestry development engineering that works as head of the Natural Resources and Climate area at Cardiff Technology Center in Spain. And he mainly focuses his work on nature-based solutions sector as coordinator of the project I mentioned, the Urban Green Up. He works also as urban greening specialist to apply this expertise in developing nature-based solutions in cities and renaturing urban plans. So Raul, over to you.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, Veronica. I'm very happy to be here to share with all of you some lessons learned and our experience or expertise regarding the Urban Green Up project, and specifically regarding the monitoring of monitoring nature-based solutions to fight against urban heat mitigation, of course, and carbon sequestration. Next slide, please. Yeah, first I would like to comment on some figures about our project. Our project, the Urban Green Up project, wants to develop a new strategy for renaturing cities, of course, using nature-based solutions. And specifically, we have introduced a new concept, the concept of renaturing urban plan, the RAP, in order to adapt this, the context of nature-based solutions, or to include the nature-based solutions context in the current urban planning. The project has 25 partners from 9 different nationalities, and it's important to emphasize that we have 3 front-runner cities in which we have implemented many nature-based solutions. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay. I think that once we have the nature-based solutions implemented in our cities, normally it appears some questions, specifically if these nature-based solutions are effective, how these nature-based solutions are working, even if these nature-based solutions are addressing our city challenges. So in our project, in the Urban Green Up project, we have developed a monitoring program based on a wide set of KPIs and indicators, as our previous colleagues mentioned. of course, taking as reference the handbook of KPIs. And we have made a KPIs selection for each front-runner cities as demonstrative cities, considering the specific climate change challenges. So the monitoring program in Valladolid, for instance, is based includes 64 KPIs, specific KPIs for the city, 42 KPIs in Liverpool, and 46 KPIs in Izmir in Turkey. Sorry, because I forgot to mention that our front-runner cities was Valladolid, Liverpool, and Izmir. Each of these KPIs is directly related to at least to one of the 10 specific climate change challenges identified from the very beginning of the project. For instance, climate mitigation, adaptation, water management, biodiversity loss, air quality, etc. Next slide, please. Okay. Well, specifically regarding the monitoring actions, there are two different processes regarding monitoring. One of them is the collection of raw data, and another one is the calculation of the indicators of the KPIs. The first one process we have named, the field process, and this process includes data taking by means of remote sensors and other technologies. We have data from several and different sources. As you can see in the slide, we have sensors from distributed in strategic areas, mobile application, GIS data, analytics and surveys, simple direct observation, something like this. And later on, we have the process of KPIs calculation, specifically through quantitative and qualitative analysis. And it will offer the results in a simple and understandable way. This is the idea. As an example of this in our project, and you can see in the slide, we have the specific nature resolutions, green shade structures, and with these nature resolutions, we want to create shadow areas, and in a pedestrian street without vegetation. And specifically with this nature resolution, we can address several climate change challenges. Specifically with these MBAs, we pretend to buffer heat island effect in our city, but also we can buffer the frost impact in the city during the winter period. And this impact is included in the climate change mitigation and adaptation challenge identified previously. To evaluate this impact, we collected data from two physical quantity, temperature and humidity, and of course through sensors installed along the street. But also we have installed the same sensors in another street with the same features as control or reference street. Later on, we calculate the KPIs from data collected, and in this case, we have two specific KPIs: the decrease in mean or peak daytime local temperatures, and another KPI is the heat wave risk. Next, please. In this slide, we can see how the implementation of this specific nature resolution green shade structures has provoked the reduction of average of around 2 degrees in the summer period. This is maybe this seems a low decrease, but it's very, very important. Another slide, please.
Please, Raul, if you can be wrapping up your presentation, please.
Of course. And this is another example of about our evaluation in monitoring activities. With this, in this case, we have reduced the 7 degrees in another KPI is the daily reduction in daily maximum temperature. And the last slide, please, is just to finalize. It's important to emphasize that, okay, we know that the monitoring of MBAs as living things is complex. Sometimes data processing and storage is complex because due to the large volume, but it is also a cost that is important to take into account as part of the cost effectiveness of our nature resolutions. But the idea is, in conclusion, is the monitoring of our nature-based solutions will support cities in the decision-making processes in order to create more sustainable cities and adapt it to climate change challenges. Thank you very much. Sorry for this extra time. Sorry.
You don't have to apologize, Raul. It's normal. Like when you start like talking about the projects you are working on, it's normal. So much excitement and so much information to be shared. But just to give the time for the final discussion. So I would like now to move again back to Finland, and now it will be we will have Maria Dubovic, sorry for the pronunciation, with us, which she is a research scientist, also at VTT, Technical Research Center of Finland. And she specialized in the water management topics such as stormwater management and urban flooding, as well as the role of nature-based solutions and green infrastructure in climate adaptation and policy implications. So we keep working in urban, and now Maria, she will talk us about monitoring and evaluating impact of nature-based solutions for flood mitigation and water quality management. So now, Maria, over to you.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. And today I'm going to tell more about our approach to monitoring and impact assessment of water management topics and NBS for water. Example from UNELAB project. UNELAB focused predominantly on NBS for water and climate in 3 frontrunner cities, Tampere, Finland, Genoa in Italy, and Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And since we're talking now about the water challenges included topics such as water quality and flooding, and also water use in more southern cities of our project. And all NBS were co-created with local stakeholders, and since we're now focusing on water management, mainly on stormwater management, as well as we were trying to target knowledge and capacity building, and all NBS were managed adaptively to ensure proper and timely maintenance, and using this information for informing future planning in the cities. Next one, please. So NBS monitoring in UNELAB for evaluating the NBS impact on water management comprised of a set of indicators evaluating the direct benefit. So out of the many indicators related to water management, we narrowed down to 13. And since UNELAB frontrunner cities represented a diversity of climates, the indicators focused on slightly different topics, including flooding, so measuring discharge and infiltration, then water quality, so measuring different water quality parameters such as pH, electrical conductivity, nutrients, and total suspended solids, and as well as water needs for irrigation, which was very topical in the city of Genoa in Italy. Since we're talking about NBS, we didn't want to evaluate just the direct benefits, and we wanted to evaluate some co-benefits, including the effects on biodiversity, citizen engagement and awareness building and education, and as well as health and well-being. And indicators were, the indicators were chosen to fit into this defined monitoring recipe, as we call it. So focusing on the size of NBS and the potential impact. Yes, next one, thank you. So NBS impact assessment in UNELAB relied on both monitoring and modeling. And we had both real-time monitoring, so with sensors, and manual grab samples for example, water quality. And monitoring included many variables for water quality and infiltration, for example, such as pH, nutrients. Monitoring proved to be invaluable for detecting the needs of different NBS for more extensive maintenance if they required any. And then monitoring also informed modeling approaches, such as the evaluation of different NBS during extreme events, if we're talking about flooding, for example, as you can see in those graphs. And also it was a valuable tool for different other planning purposes in the UNELAB frontrunner cities, including prioritizing areas for other NBS interventions. Next one, please. So I guess I will link this slide to what Laura presented, like why would we monitor at all? The importance of NBS is emphasized and supported by the global agenda, and we see NBS being prioritized for climate adaptation actions, and monitoring helps us generate more evidence, which will help support the wider uptake of NBS, as well as inform the future coming policies. And if you click on the next, there should be more text appearing. And once more. So yes, the global agenda and NBS are directly linked and influence each other. And we can see this not only for water, but also for other topics we're interested in, such as biodiversity and just social transition to climate neutrality. Next one. So wrapping up, what were the main takeaways of UNALAB regarding monitoring of water management in and NBS for water management is that the best outputs and the best impact assessment emerge from the combination of tools, methods, and data sources. However, aligning them is challenging, and it may prove very challenging, especially if the data is collected over different temporal and spatial scales. However, having different data definitely benefits the impact assessment of various NBS. And of course, monitoring activities generate a lot of data, and we cannot emphasize how much data they generate. And data ownership and governance were deemed to be essential, and they must be defined in the very early stages of NBS planning and NBS project, so that the monitoring efforts deliver the quality data that can be assessed and evaluated later. Also, monitoring informs future developments of climate adaptation plans and strategies towards climate resilience in the UNALAB frontrunner cities and also follower cities. So we think it's a major improvement, and it highlights the necessity of monitoring. Also, citizen science, which was employed largely in Finland for monitoring, for example, water quality. It proved to be an essential part of monitoring because it not only generates complementary large data sets, it also serves as means for educating the citizens and the public. And of course, all of these conclusions and the other takeaways, they aim and foster at the evidence-based or evidence-informed decision-making so that we build more resilient cities and urban areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you for your presentation. Now, last but not least, we will pass into our last speaker, which is pretty linked as well with Maria's presentation. You mentioned, Maria, about focusing on extreme events like flooding, which will become more severe and more frequent. So what we need is like to become more resilient, right, as a society, but also nature needs to become more resilient and to adapt to these extreme events. So this will be the presentation for our last speaker, Igone Garcia. She will be presenting on building societal resilience and capacity, another area of work. And Igone, she's a project director and researcher in Tecnalia. She has proven experience in definition of monitoring strategies for the nature-based solutions impact assessment to inform planning and urban design for climate resilience. And as I say, her presentation will focus in sharing the lessons learned of the Grow Green project she is working on. So, Igone, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Veronica, for the presentation. Grow Green is a very similar project in terms of the already existing project that has been presented today. And as you are mentioned, my presentation will focus on the lesson learned in the project during the impact assessment of NBS for climate resilience using the handbook that was already introduced by Laura in her first presentation. Please, next slide. When we are thinking of monitoring and to select the appropriate KPIs, one of the first steps is defining the impact chain. The impact chain describes a cause-effect relationship among elements that contributes to the consequences of a given combination of hazards and exposed receptors. The selected KPI should cover the following objectives mainly: being sensible to the NBS capacity of increasing resilience, having relationship with the already existing information to facilitate comparison, and providing balance between the consideration of the local contact needs and the requirement of scientific robustness. That's why the handbook that has been presented by Laura is so relevant, because it provides us some key ideas to fulfill these objectives in order to select our best KPIs for impact assessment, considering the specificities of the specific interventions. Please, next slides. There are different possible methodologies to assess the MBS impact, and all of them can play a key role to build evidence. There are some messages to be highlighted. Firstly, for a targeted monitoring strategy, the impact assessment should be planned during the design of the MBS, so from the beginning. The definition of a local monitoring plan using the local expertise and knowledge is key for a successful monitoring strategy. Long-term monitoring is a variable to be considered since the beginning. Long series of data are relevant to deliver the impact, especially for climate resilience. And as it has been already mentioned by Maria, modeling at different scales can also play a key role in order to identify the priority areas for MBS implementations, and also to influence the urban design, facilitating the benchmarking of design alternatives to integrate climate resilience as a criteria for decision-making. But also, modeling can be useful to provide effectiveness assessment considering climate scenarios, and support the definition of the monitoring strategy through the identification of the best locations to install sensors. Next slide, please. But how can the MBS effectiveness for climate resilience be optimized? The design of the MBS per se is key. Defining the type, the location, and other characteristics of the solution, considering the specificities of the site interventions, is a relevant task to take into account. Scale is also relevant. To go beyond the site-level influence of MBS, an upscaling and replication strategy should be planned through large-scale interventions, such as, for instance, the blue and green infrastructure one. In the boxes, we are presenting some of the main messages of the effect of the MBS for thermal stress, water management, and CO2 emission. In the grow green materials, you can find a quantification of this effect. Some of the results that has been presented by Raúl, for instance, reducing 2 degrees in the medium, are similar to the ones that we have been obtaining in grow green. So this is quite relevant to be mentioned, because we are more or less using the same KPI, so we are more or less obtaining the similar types of results. It should be mentioned that the final effectiveness of MBS is directly dependent on the type of intervention and the climate context. That's why the design phase of the MBS is key, as it has been already mentioned. And finally, I will close my presentation, and hopefully I can provide some additional points that to the things that have been already mentioned for the previous panelists, hopefully. But I have seen some common ideas. Monitoring is devoted to provide data for better informed decisions, offering the MBS effectiveness for climate resilience at both scale, urban design, microscale, and also at urban planning. It is confirmed the evidence of this effectiveness, and the design of the MBS is crucial for maximizing the impact. Also, the magnitude and the scale of the intervention has a very deep influence on the final impact that will be delivered. And finally, as it has been shown in our different presentations, MBS provide multiple co-benefits and multifunctionality. So they are non-regret actions for climate resilience. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Igone, for your presentation. And thank you for all of you. It was very insightful and so many details that I hope now during the questions discussion we can go more into a little bit more in detail. But before we open the discussion, I will invite you, if you have still like some question to be posed, please do so in the Slido. You can have access on the link. And as well, I would like to launch again the first question we added in the Slido, so we can you can also in the meantime respond. And I would like to take one first question And I don't think it's a very tricky one, but I would like to take a first question, and this one will be for Laura Welding. So the first question, let me I go up because I cannot see interesting on Slido myself. So the first question is, and thank you so much. So for Lara, if the handbooks provide more than one method to monitor a given impact, how do I know which one to use? This refers to what you were presenting right at the beginning.
Yeah, and okay, this is a great question because there are so many different methods and a lot of them are equally valid. And so what we've tried to do in the handbook is where there were several different techniques that could potentially be used, is we tried to highlight the advantages and disadvantages of each. So, for example, one may require much more intensive data collection or a much greater level of expertise in terms of the analysis of the data. We tried to give some indication of why one method may be preferred over another in a given scenario, but it's really up to individuals to decide to read the methods. They're not long, it's just a short description, but read it through and see, does this sound like something we can do? Do we have the resources? Do we have the expertise? Are we interested in data at this level of frequency, or are we looking for less frequent analysis, more periodic? So it sounds more complicated than it really is. The way that the methods are structured in the appendix should provide that information that it's fairly easy to decide.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. So I guess also the question could be like thinking what you just mentioned about this and the different methodologies, but also will be one of the questions is, what is the hardest part in defining and measuring the impact? One is about the methodologies, but also what about defining? So maybe Marilee, if you would like to come in to this question.
Yes, it's quite daunting, the whole impact measurement piece. And I think another bit to add to Laura's very, very good reply and guidance on how to use the handbook, it is to figure out who cares about these impacts and who do you want to interest in these nature-based solutions. From a financial standpoint, obviously, if you need money, you need to look to see what the funders are willing or want to contribute to. If you need community support or you're trying to build community support, what does the community want? So I would add to the very many criteria, or the what Lara was saying, who is it that cares about what you might change through your nature-based solution, and can you deliver that information to them?
Yeah, that's indeed a very good point. Like, who cares, no? To whom are we reporting to, or who will see what is the monitoring being done? So maybe this can be linked as well, not about only about who, but also about the when or the time. And one question that is here on Slido is, for how long a monitoring strategy for nature-based solutions should be planned? So maybe this I will leave it to our colleagues, Raul, Igone, Maria, but the rest, Marilee and Laura, you can contribute, please, if you want to. So I can say maybe Raul, with regard to the how long.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it is. I think that it is essential to establish, of course, I think that my colleague Igone and the rest of colleagues provide more information about this, but I think that this is essential to establish from the very beginning of our project and a strategy for monitoring. Maybe not only thinking in the period of the project. I think that is very important to think that how we will be able to establish a monitoring strategy even beyond the project, because sometimes this is we are working with living things, with trees and similar things, and the monitoring of these of the nature-based solutions, I think that sometimes is not enough during the projects, the previous projects, and it's necessary to establish this monitoring strategy or program beyond the project and to establish agreement with cities or program with cities to work on this.
Maria, Igone, you would like to be?
something, it is a quite relevant question, because maintaining the monitoring strategy after the project life is quite challenging, because sometimes you have lack of resources. Considering what we have learned in our projects is that the more you link your micro-scale monitoring strategy with the already existing monitoring strategies in the city, the easier it will be to maintain this in the future. So this is another thing also to take into account when you are selecting KPIs or metrics. Let's identify the ones that you have already been measuring in your city or in your region, and try to select the same ones. Hopefully, during a project, when you have a funding, you will have the possibility to add 2 or 3 new sensors to the already existing monitoring strategy and align this with the previous database. Because unfortunately or fortunately, we need very long data series, a very long period of data for the climate analysis. And so it is important to maintain long-term monitoring strategy for MBS solutions. Despite of the fact in short term, as we have been explaining in our projects, also positive impacts are delivered. But we are probably considering the future climate scenarios, the MBS effectiveness is going to be much more farther or bigger than the ones that we are seeing with the already existing meteorological conditions. So I think that when the climate gets worse or hotter or more challenging, I think the MBS solutions will provide a more added value to the one that we are already seeing right now with the actual conditions of climate.
Yeah, I totally second everything that Igone and Raul said. We desperately need some longitudinal studies and impact assessment and evaluation over longer periods of time. And also, I think one of the interesting questions is how NBS perform in the changing climate. Like, do they deliver the benefits and co-benefits we envisage them to deliver, and can they withstand the changing climates? What happens to them? And I think this also links to the data governance, which we raised in our project. If the data ownership and governance is clear and is settled, then monitoring beyond the project duration is, well, possible.
Yeah, indeed, this is a matter always like the scale. We talk about like geographical scale, but also the time scale. Like, when are we monitoring, until when, no? And being mindful as well that the projects, they have a duration. So what is happening after the project ends? How we make sure that the monitoring is still being running after that period of time. And most importantly, how the co-benefits, you mentioned, Maria, one of the co-benefits that nature-based solutions provide, they can keep being monitored. And this I will go with a question for all of you, and then you can jump in. And the question is, for all experts, did you assess the socioeconomic impacts, benefits of the nature-based solutions you have implemented? If so, what were the challenges you faced and how did you face them? So maybe I will start back again with Marilee and Laura, and then to the rest of you, Igone, Raul, and Maria.
Super. Well, I go first on that, because certainly for the second bit, that's what we were reporting on, the economic impacts. And the challenges there were really to go out and find sources of information that were reasonably accessible without a lot of investment in new data collection. It was our assumption that that would be the case, because economic data is widely collected and at very low levels of specification. So that was available, but connecting it to the nature-based solution was a critical piece. And the way we overcame that was through geographic information, is placing the nature-based solution in a specific administrative unit where there was economic data and indeed some social data collected at that level of geographic specification, and then associating that with the work of whatever the NBS was. And so that's how we addressed it. I might pass it on to others to give other approaches.
Yeah, Laura, if you want to come in.
Sure. I guess I could just say that we looked at a range of different metrics in terms of social or economic or socioeconomic co-benefits, both through a direct acquisition of data. So looking at conditions before and after NBS implementation, data that's routinely collected by the municipality. We looked to see if there was a significant change. And we also did some modeling. So looking at a baseline level, so pre-NBS action, what's happened immediately after the NBS action was implemented, and then trying to forecast what are the expected benefits in the future given specific climate and population scenarios. But maybe Maria could actually answer in a little bit more detail.
I think the question was, what were the challenges? I think the challenge is not having enough time to measure the impact. So I believe this was probably adding to what Marilee said about tying it to NBS, and then also trying to see whether it actually made a difference. And I believe we just need more time for that.
Okay, so, well, we have gone through the whole range, like scale, time, stakeholders as well, to whom are we monitoring, to whom are we sharing the message, which is that's the way also then how we frame the message we are giving to really emphasize that nature-based solutions have a strong potential, that we are sure that it is still not unpacked at the 100%, but we need to keep working on it. And we have 3 minutes. And before we close the session today, I will really like, and knowing that we are on the 27th climate COP, 27 times that expert worldwide decisions makers, they get together to discuss about climate change. For you, a word that you can share with all the audience today that brings inspiration on how we should keep moving forward on nature-based solutions. A word or two that brings you inspiration. I give you a few seconds because it wasn't expected. Or if you prefer, like if it's much easier, short message about inspiration, how we keep moving forward together on nature-based solutions. And I will start by you, Raul.
Thank you for this. Yeah. No, yeah, I think that this event is an opportunity to inspire many people. So I don't know if I can inspire people, but I think that we have sometimes
We lost Raul. Okay, I thought it was on my side. So I being cautious of time while he can connect. Marilee, if you can give your very brief message.
I think the inspiration from these projects is that we move forward together on all fronts, not just on the climate adaptation front, but also on the just transition front. It's crucial to tie these together. There are 2 big crises of inequality and climate change, and they need to be pulled together. And I think COP27 is looking at that through the loss and damage. And I think we need to sign up and go forward together on it.
Thank you, Marilee. Now, Igone, over to you. Inspiration.
To be inspired, the best thing is trying to use all the expertise that is available. Please, let's talk to all the different kind of professions and technical expertise that you can put together to this, because it's quite urgent to use NBS for climate adaptation. And I think it's already proven that they have a lot of co-benefits and multifunctionality. So let's move and let's start implementation in a large scale, because NBS solutions can contribute to this climate urgency that we are facing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Igone. Maria, and then Laura.
Well, I think at least for me, the inspiration is passionate people that want to drive this forward. And looking at what we have achieved and at other cohorts of projects that look at different challenges that NBS address, I think this alone inspires already to act. So I hope that if we inspire at least several people, that will be already a big progress.
Thank you, Maria. Laura?
So I would just echo what my colleagues have already said, that the really inspiring part about nature-based solutions is that we can address so many really urgent challenges with one action. It can, if the main focus may be climate adaptation or climate change mitigation, but at the same time we can look at just transition and biodiversity crisis. And the multiple benefits are what really make NBS powerful. And that's inspiring to see all of the benefit that can be achieved with one single action. So be inspired by the handbook.
I echo this and support this. And definitely what we have been saying, we are facing is not a single crisis. We are facing multiple crises, and nature-based solutions can help in tackling those crises jointly. I would like to come back to the Slido pool just for the closing to see if the participants, they change their mind. And then to have, again, thank you so much before we close the session. So please vote for the same question that we have at the beginning. Which of the following impact areas do you believe are the most likely to change through NBS implementation? Wow, we see like, oh, it's a bit of a change. We have now inclusive participatory processes like came up as a top priority, and new economics opportunities and jobs, which is a critical topic, particularly for the new generations, youth generation as well. Okay, so if we can close the Slido, please, and then we can give the final remarks. So we see like the 4 topics that were key to discuss today, and a big thank to all of you speakers that worked with us today and giving all this detailed information about how to implement nature-based solutions, but what are the critical points that we have to work together to make this happen. And especially a big thanks to all of you that have worked on the handbook, which is a key tool that should be or must be used for designing, implementing, and monitoring NBS projects. So with this, a big thanks to all of you, and keep enjoying COP27.